You are listening to Weekly AI News with Shaylee. This week, I kept coming back to one specific, almost unbelievable comparison. Imagine a tiny 3 billion parameter model running locally on your phone. Now, imagine that model completely outperforming a massive 100 billion parameter cloud giant simply by changing how it thinks at runtime. If that sounds like a glitch in the matrix, I promise you it isn't. This week, the absolute doctrine of bigger is better officially fractured. We are tracking a tectonic shift in how AI models use compute, a massive open source release that finally matches the closed source kings, and the first major regulatory hammer dropping in Europe. My name is Shailendraa Kumar, and we are going to unpack how the landscape just changed forever. I have been watching this space for a long time, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is that when Meta moves, they move for the throat. On July 23rd, Mark Zuckerberg and Jan LeCun officially unleashed Llama 4. This is the flagship model family we have been waiting for, topped by a 405 billion parameter beast trained on over 25 trillion tokens. It is a native multimodal mixture of experts architecture with a 1 million token context window. But forget the specs for a second. Here is the so what. This model is matching or beating GPT 4.0 and Claude 3.5 Sonnet across reasoning and math benchmarks. Meta has essentially commoditized raw intelligence. They have taken what OpenAI and Anthropic treat as a premium high walled garden and made it a public park. For the enterprise leaders I talk to every day, this is the moment of absolute data sovereignty. You can now run a frontier class model entirely on your own infrastructure. This forces the entire industry to stop obsessing over base model capabilities and start focusing on specialized agentic execution. The premium isn't in the model anymore, it is in what you do with it. Now, you might think that Llama 4's massive size is the only way to get high level intelligence. But stay with me for a second because a landmark paper from Google DeepMind just proved that isn't true. They mathematically proved that scaling inference time compute, that is the energy the model spends while it's thinking about your question, yields greater gains than just scaling the training compute. Think of it like this: training a massive model is like hiring a genius who has read every book but has to answer every question instantly. Scaling test time compute is like hiring a smart student and giving them a pen, paper, and 10 minutes to double check their work. DeepMind showed that a 2.3 billion parameter model, when allowed to use dynamic search and self correction at runtime, can actually beat a 14 billion parameter model. When I first read this paper, I had to stop and reread the methodology section twice. It completely upends the economics of AI. We are moving away from brute force pre training toward thinking on the fly. This is the key that unlocks high level reasoning for robots and edge devices that can't wait for a cloud server to reply. But while the researchers are finding ways to make models smarter, the regulators are finding ways to make them more accountable. This week, the European Union AI Act's strict compliance deadlines officially went into full effect. The regulatory free for all is over. If you are a developer deploying a frontier model with cumulative training compute exceeding 10 to the 25th power flops in Europe, you are now under the microscope. We are talking mandatory evaluations, adversarial testing, and reporting energy consumption. If you don't comply, the fines are historic, up to 35 million euros or 7% of global annual turnover. I have said this before, but it bears repeating. This creates a compliance heavy landscape that naturally favors the deep pocketed tech giants over the agile open source community. We might be watching the global AI market fracture right before our eyes into EU compliant and non EU compliant branches. If you build with AI, this is the question you should be asking your legal team on Monday morning. Are we tracking our flops, or are we just hoping we don't get a letter from Brussels? Speaking of high stakes deployments, OpenAI isn't sitting still. They just launched GPT-5 Voyager. This isn't just a chatbot, it's an autonomous enterprise agent. It's built on a native state machine engine that allows it to execute multi step, hours long workflows. In testing, it hit a record breaking 92% success rate on the SWE bench coding benchmark. To put that in perspective, the previous generation was hovering around 49%. This is the transition from LLMs as passive assistants to active digital employees. Instead of generating a snippet of code, Voyager can independently plan, execute, debug, and verify entire software pipelines. In my book, Making Money Out of Data, I argued that the value of data is zero until it drives a decision. Well, OpenAI just took it a step further. The value of data is now being captured by agents that perform the action. The business model of software is shifting from per seat licensing to per task completion. Traditional software vendors have to rebuild their entire architectures around agent compatibility, or they will simply be bypassed. While OpenAI is focusing on these massive enterprise workflows, Apple is quietly winning the battle for your pocket. Apple Machine Learning Research just published UI GEPI. It is a 3 billion parameter model designed for dynamic on-device user interface understanding. Most models try to understand a screen by turning pixels into text, which is incredibly slow and power hungry. Apple's architecture uses predictive embeddings to anticipate screen transitions and gestures with near zero latency. This means your future iPhone will run private, instantaneous app automation without ever sending a single pixel of your personal data to a cloud server. Apple isn't trying to build a better chatbot. They are building the connective tissue between you and every app you own. It is subtle, it is local, and it is incredibly fast. Okay, so here is what I think is actually going on. Let me connect some dots here because there is a story underneath the story this week. I call it the post training pivot. For years, we have equated progress with brute force scaling, more data, more GPUs, more parameters. But we are hitting a wall. We are running out of human generated data, and we are hitting regulatory limits like the EU AI Act. So the industry is shifting its capital and its genius to what happens after a model is trained. DeepMind's test time search, Apple's predictive embeddings, and OpenAI's state cached feedback loops are all part of the same movement. They are squeezing massive capabilities out of smaller, cheaper base models. Most observers are still judging AI power by parameter count, but they are looking at the wrong scoreboard. In the next 90 days, I expect to see the emergence of inference marketplaces. You won't buy models by the token anymore. You'll pay for reasoning time tiers. You'll pay for a model to think longer and harder on a complex problem before it gives you the answer. If you want to see this in action for yourself, I have a discovery for you to check out on Monday. It is a project on GitHub called Auto DevOps Local. It is a perfect example of this pivot. It takes the newly released Llama 4 8 billion parameter model and integrates it with local test time search loops. It creates a fully self-healing developer assistant that runs entirely within Llama. It monitors your local repository, spins up Docker containers to test your code, detects errors, and writes unit tests to repair the code base autonomously. All of this happens on your machine. No data leaks to the cloud, no API fees. If you try one thing this week, let it be this. Download it, run it against a buggy side project, and watch it work. It's a glimpse into a future where agents are ubiquitous because they are free and private. Now, for the verdict of the week. Who actually won the last 7 days? A lot of people are pointing to Meta and Llama 4, and I understand why. But for me, the winner is Google DeepMind's scaling test time compute research. Llama 4 is an incredible engineering triumph, but DeepMind's paper provides the theoretical blueprint for the next decade of AI design. It decouples intelligence from physical hardware limits. By proving that runtime search can elevate small models to elite levels, they have opened the floodgates for intelligent agents on the edge. But here is my contrarian take, and I know I might get some pushback on this. Everyone is celebrating Llama 4 as the ultimate victory for open source. But look at the hosting economics. The hardware footprint required to run a 405 billion parameter model at scale is so massive that only the hyperscalers, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, can actually serve it for most companies. Meta hasn't truly democratized AI. They have simply shifted the toll booth. Instead of paying OpenAI for API fees, you'll be paying Microsoft Azure for cloud hosting bills. Big tech still owns the physical infrastructure layer, and that's a grip that open source software alone can't break. This week reminded me that the most important part of any system isn't how it starts, but how it adapts. Whether it's a model self correcting its own logic or an enterprise adapting to new EU regulations, the winners are those who can reason through the complexity. If something in today's episode sparked a thought or a counterargument, I genuinely want to hear it. Drop it in the comments on YouTube, find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or just share this with one person who would appreciate the deep dive. That is how this community grows. Next week, we are looking at something that has been quietly building for 18 months in the background of everything we talked about today. It is a development in synthetic data generation that I think is going to reframe how you think about the limits of machine learning. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay curious, stay ahead. This is Shailendraa signing off.